Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. In Luke chapter 14, we have the Lord giving us 3 lessons in connection to feasts. And it's amazing how Jesus was able to take just average, ordinary things, the day-to-day things, and plug into them some great spiritual truths. And he's able to take something as simple as having a feast, inviting some people over for a meal, and turning that into some great teachings. And these are some lessons that we can put into practice immediately. So this is something I think worth looking into. The first lesson that we learned is a lesson of humility. Jesus was observing how some of the people would sit down, and they would try to sit down in the best seats, the seats of honor. And Jesus instructs them to say, hey, when you go to a feast, don't sit down in the best seat, the seat of honor, because it might just be that the host might come and say, look, this seat was actually reserved for someone else. Could you please kindly reposition yourself in the lower seat? And then that would be humiliating. He's saying, don't do that. When you go to a feast, sit down in the lowest place, in the place of the least honor. And then when the host comes, he might come to you and actually say, look, don't sit in this low seat. Sit in this place of honor. And then when people see you being ushered by the host himself into the best seat, then you'll have honor in front of other people. And of course, here he's not just giving us advice on how to, what position to sit in when we sit down at a feast. He's actually teaching us a deeper principle. And that is, he's showing us a principle of the kingdom. That is that in God's kingdom, it's not those who are presumptuously prideful. That is, they're the ones that just assume that they're the better people and that they have the better position. Those are not the people that God is looking to honor. He's looking to honor those who are humble, who have a humble spirit. This is not only found in the teachings of Jesus, but also throughout all scriptures. We know that the humble are lifted up by God, James 4 and verse 10. We know that the humble are regarded by God. You go to Psalms 138 and verse 6 for that. We know that the humble are heard by God. Their prayers are heard by God. Psalms 10 and verse 17. We know also that the humble receive grace. That very famous scripture, James chapter 4 and verse 6, where it says that God is opposed to the proud but gives grace to the humble. We know that the humble enjoy the presence of God. And I think that perhaps is the one that really resonates with me. Those who are humble enjoy the presence of God. And we could reference Isaiah 57 and verse 15. God is seeking those who have a humble heart to come and work with and live with and to bless. But if we have a hard heart, if we're prideful, if we're arrogant, now how can God work in our lives in that particular situation? God's looking for those who have a humble heart, a soft heart, someone whom he can come in and work, have residence, and influence to do great things. And it shows even more the power of God when he uses those who do not have a prestigious position, who are not powerful, who are not influential or wealthy. When he can use those who don't have those qualities, it even brings more honor to himself, because his power would be more evident when he works through the humble. We know that the gospel itself is built upon the principle of being humble. We could turn to Romans chapter 3 and verse 27. That basically sums up it all to say, you know what? The gospel is set up in such a way that there is no boasting. If God had set up a way that we could approach him by our own works, by our own ability, by our own achievements, then that would just feed our pride, because we say, hey, I achieved this, I did this, this is what I have accomplished, and therefore I have a standing before God. But the way that it's all set up is that we have to realize we can't do it on our own. We can't mount up enough good works. We can't live perfectly before God, sinlessly before him, and somehow earn a place before him. We have to recognize the fact that we fall short, and we fall short so often. And so we have to rely upon him. We have to be humble and say, Lord, do for me what I can't do for myself. Help me to have a position before you, to achieve a righteousness that I cannot achieve. So that's the first lesson, a lesson of humility. Then we have another story about feasts that gives us a lesson about love. And here, he's speaking to the opposite party here. Whereas he was talking to the person who was invited to the feast, now he's talking to the person who actually invites people to the feast, the host. And he says, when you invite people, don't invite those who can pay you back, who can repay you, like your friends, your relatives, and others, because you might have you might have a secret motive that, hey, I'm going to invite this person because they might invite me later to their feast. And Jesus is saying, don't have that type of attitude. Invite those who can't return the favor. Invite the needy, the poor, the sick, the lame. Invite those who are not able to return back to you. That's where we find favor with God, when we do that. And when we do that, really what we're doing is just exemplifying what God himself does for us. If you think about it, in our position before God, there's really nothing that we could do to earn our position before him. And this demonstrates the love of God. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. That is the love of God. And he does it not based on the fact that somehow we're going to be able to repay him, that he's going to gain something out of it. Of course, we had nothing to offer him. Remember in Micah chapter 6, verses 6 through 7, you have Micah coming to the realization that, hey, there's nothing I can offer the Lord. There's not enough sacrifices. There's not enough anointing oil. Even if I gave my firstborn to the Lord, it would not be what he desires. There's nothing that we can give him. There's not enough money. There's not enough possessions. There's not enough of anything that we can offer the Lord that would somehow benefit him. Remember, everything belongs to God in the first place. So when he acts for us, he does it purely out of love, not out of somehow gaining something from it. And so we should exemplify that in our lives. We should demonstrate that same love by helping people who are not able to return the favor. And I think we need to ask ourselves, when was the last time that we actually helped someone who we knew would never be able to repay us? For some, it might have been today. It might have been yesterday. It may not have been a very long time ago, but for some, it might have been a very long time. Because typically when we think about doing good, we typically do good to our family members or to our friends or to other people that we like, that we have this exchange of gifts, exchange of favors. But we need to be looking for those that are outside of that sphere. People, again, who cannot repay us. That's true love, when you can do something for someone who cannot repay it. But then we have a third lesson as well, as mentioned, and this one has to do with this feast in which the host invites some people to come to his dinner. And this lesson shows us that even though all may be invited, only certain ones will actually come. And so he says, invite the people, or bring the people I've invited to my feast to come and dine with me. Well, these people were too preoccupied to come to the feast. All of them had all these things, I'm married a wife, therefore I can't come. I need to test some oxen, I can't come. They had all these different excuses. And so, of course, the host got angry. These guys are too busy to come to my feast after I invited them. So he says, go out and find the poor, the lame, the cripple, and bring them in, because I want my house to be full. And then even after they brought them in, there still was room. And he said, I want my house to be full. And so they went out into the highways and into the outskirts and brought in more people into the feast. And so what this teaches us, this actually teaches us several principles. For one, this shows us the outline of what would happen with the gospel. It would first start with Israel, with the Jewish nation, that it was right for them to first have the invitation to the feast, to the blessings of God. And although quite a few of them accepted it, many rejected it. And so then the call was to the Samaritans, and then eventually to the Gentiles and to the ends of the world. And to the point that now God is inviting all peoples from all nations, all races, all of them to come to the feast. The invitation is open to all. And so we are to, of course, take hold of that invitation and say, look, that is the place I want to be. But sometimes it takes us being in a position of coming to the end of ourselves before we accept the invitation, much like the poor, the lame, and others. Those who had worldly possessions, who were comfortable in their lifestyle, did not come to the feast because they didn't really see a need for it. It was just something that they would do if they had time for it. Well, spiritually speaking, we might feel the same way. We might think, well, if I have time for it, I might accept Christ. I might come to give my life over to Him, but you know, my life's pretty good right now. I have a few things going on in my life that keeps me busy. I don't have time for that religious stuff, basically. Well, we might do that, and we might end up doing it until it's too late. And before we know it, we've lost. The time has come for the feast, and we have not taken advantage of the invitation, and therefore we will be left out of all the blessings and the wonder that God has prepared for those who do accept the invitation. And so we need to understand that. And we also need to understand that it's not always the people who you think would come and receive the gospel that come. A lot of times we think, well, you know, this certain person, he's a pretty righteous person already. He's already pretty good, so I think he would be a good candidate for accepting the gospel. But a lot of times we find that's not the case. Many times we have to come to the people who have come to the end of themselves, those who have lived a life of sin, have realized how destructive it is in their life, in their marriages, in their relationships, in their finances, and all different areas of their life, how destructive sin is, and they understand the consequences of what they have done, and they realize that they need a way out. And those are the ones who are most likely to receive the gospel, and to receive the free offer of forgiveness that God can give them. And so these are 3 lessons from these 3 feasts. Let's take some time thinking about these feasts today and what they mean in our lives. I do thank you guys for listening in today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.